This is All About Bitcoin, a show dedicated to all things questions and markets related to Bitcoin, little b for the currency, and Bitcoin, big B for the network, a collective journey to understand, apply, and use this innovation, all Bitcoin, all the time. Let's have a live look at Bitcoin right now. The CoinDesk Bitcoin price XVX index currently at $40,951. Bitcoin is going lower about 65 basis points. The most reliable reference prices for institutions since 2014 are now published under the CoinDesk brand, trusted globally as the leader in crypto news, events, and data. Let's take a look at some of our top stories. The Federal Reserve is preparing for more aggressive interest rate hikes to curb rising inflation. Fed Chair Jerome Powell saying at a conference of business economists today, there is an, quote, obvious need to move expeditiously to return the stance of monetary policy to a more neutral level, and then to move to more restrictive levels if that is what is required to restore price stability. Last week, the U.S. Central Bank raised interest rates by 0.25% and forecast 6 more similarly sized hikes this year. U.S. equities falling from half to over 1% amid the news. Meanwhile, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission once again delaying decisions on applications for spot Bitcoin exchange-traded funds from WisdomTree Investments and One River Asset Management, according to separate filings Monday. The move continues a pattern by the U.S. securities regulator to deny or not take action on all spot Bitcoin ETF applications. And finally, 86% of local businesses in El Salvador reporting they did not make sales using Bitcoin. About 4% say they did. Around 4% saying Bitcoin has had a positive impact on sales, while over 90% saying it doesn't really make a difference at all, according to El Salvador's Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
The chart of the day is brought to you by Crypto.com, the world's fastest growing crypto app.
Bitcoin trading in the red Monday, along with traditional markets following Fed Chair Jerome Powell's hawkish tone on addressing inflation and a cautious China that is keeping interest rates unchanged, disappointing markets. Nevertheless, risk appears to be on the table. While Bitcoin has yet to exit the downtrend on technical charts, the dollar value locked in the Bitcoin futures contracts open on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, a proxy for institutional participation, has exited the downtrend according to skew data. CoinDesk's Omkar Gaboli noting that open interest has breached the trend line falling from November highs. In other words, the CME open interest suggests that the downtrend is over. Historically, a breakout in the CME's open interest has coincided with the end of bear runs and a reversal higher in the spot market. Open interest dived out of an uptrend line at the end of April 2021, warning of an impending sell-off. Bitcoin crashed in mid-May. Right, joining us now to discuss BTC price and more is Justin Chuh, senior trader at financial software firm Wave Financial. Hello there, Justin. Thanks for joining us. So, Bitcoin futures contracts on the CME breaking the downtrend line. Will we see the same happen on the Bitcoin spot market anytime soon?
Hey, Christine. Glad to be back. Honestly, hopefully not. I see Bitcoin spot ranging in a higher level than where we have sold off from last time in the summer of 2021. Currently, we're at a higher range in between 35,000 and 44,000, which is a much smaller range than before, where previously we were ranging between 40,000 and 29,000 last year from that May sell-off. So I like seeing that we're in a tighter level and higher than we were last time.
All right. So where do we go from here? Higher highs, lower lows?
Honestly, I think we'll be stuck in this range that I just mentioned, with a lot of the macro forces keeping the markets pinned down, specifically the inflation that you've already been talking about, and the Ukraine-Russia crisis. On the inflation spot for a moment, as you've been saying, the Fed is, drastically increasing interest rates with 6 more scheduled for this year and maybe even 3 more for 2023. And this is different compared to, what the Fed was doing 15 years ago, 2008, when I first entered the capital markets. And we're seeing, the hikes are a little bit, they could be steeper and longer because they're really trying to get the natural rate above 2%.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think will be the ramifications of the Fed being more hawkish, the uncertainty we're seeing in Russia and Ukraine? Russia, of course, a big producer of fossil fuels that has oil skyrocketing. I believe that WTI is trading up about 7% today. So, and China's kind of holding tight on their own interest rates. So how will that impact the crypto markets?
Well, the interest rate hikes are going to, let's step back for a second. I guess Bitcoin is becoming more correlated as a risk asset, and obviously the interest rate hikes will, demand more returns from other risk assets. And if they're not going to, funds won't necessarily flow there. But the hikes are going to keep stocks and risk assets such as Bitcoin and other currencies, kind of topped off. There's going to be an upper limit to their pricing as of now until I think we get a better picture of what they're going to do in terms of quantitative tightening, I guess, and how fast and how soon or how big even the rate hikes are going to be. And then even on the downside, I think now from last week's FOMC meeting, there were no surprises. So right now we're sort of seeing a bump from, unwinding some of those FOMC downside hedges. And we'll kind of be in between that as we, figure out, are we going to have more hikes? Are they going to be as expected? Is quantitative tightening happening as soon as it's supposed to be and at the same levels that we expected?
Are you seeing any metrics on, what folks are doing in terms of holding, in terms of their wallet activity, coins leaving exchanges? Any kind of data that you find in terms of trends that hint at what people are doing?
I haven't been noticing much in terms of like options volume, but we are seeing that people, because of this range, that the people are trying to sell volatility instead of, pick bottoms and sell tops. Obviously, we should expect spot volume to increase as we enter, value accumulation areas. But other than that, I haven't seen particular signals as to where we're going to head. I think market participants are just going to, take advantage of this range and again accumulate at value areas and take profits where, things are a bit frothy.
All right. We'll end it there. Thank you, Justin, for your analysis. That was Wave Financial Senior Trader Justin Chuh. Coming up, Wasabi Wallet is limiting some Bitcoin transactions. We'll have more discussion with Bill Hillebrand, a Wasabi Wallet contributor. Max Hillebrand, sorry. Welcome back. ZK Snacks, the company behind the Wasabi wallet, is barring certain Bitcoin transactions from its coordinator service that facilitates privacy-enhancing transactions known as CoinJoins. Wasabi developers saying the move is necessary to prevent hackers and scammers from using the service and to keep the company out of trouble. All right, joining us now to discuss is Max Hillebrand, Wasabi wallet contributor, Bitcoin maximalist, and digital nomad. Hello there, Max. Thanks for joining us. So, tell us exactly what's happening here. Walk us through what a CoinJoin is, what a coordinator is, and what is being blacklisted exactly.
So the beauty of Bitcoin is that anyone can verify every transaction that has ever happened on the network. And then this is essential in establishing that there's, for example, only 21 million coins in circulation. However, that of course means that every sender and receiver of a payment needs to reveal quite a bit of information about himself, specifically the address to which it gets paid, right, and the amount of money that you receive to this address, and when you end up spending the coins that you received there. And especially there can be a transaction graph that builds up when you spend your Bitcoin all by yourself. Right? It might be quite easy to figure out where your future payments are happening to. And this is something that's quite different in compared to regular financial matters. I mean, cash has perfect transactional anonymity, whereas even in banking services, any outside observer cannot simply follow your transaction payments that you make in your bank account, right? And the idea of a CoinJoin is to simply not make these Bitcoin transactions all alone by yourself, right? But to team up with some other friends and to create a single Bitcoin transaction that spends many coins and that creates many output addresses. Right? And these can be arranged to be obscuring the actual transaction flow that happens here. And this is quite a valuable service for basically everyone who just doesn't want to know the barista to know how much money you've earned in the past. And with Wasabi Wallet 2.0 especially, we've focused on making this CoinJoin transaction process as efficient and as reliable as possible, so that it ends up being rather cheap and intuitive for the user, so that now these CoinJoin transactions can happen by default in the background for everyone in Wasabi Wallet 2.0.
Mm-hmm. Great explanation. And so tell us what a coordinator is, and you've made a decision at Wasabi Wallet, which is to blacklist certain Bitcoin transactions. Tell us a bit about what went into that decision and how it's being implemented.
So the coordinator is basically the chat room where different users get together to build this collaborative Bitcoin transaction. Basically a whiteboard where you write your partially Bitcoin transaction. And the goal of the coordinator is basically to curate the users who have access to this whiteboard in a way that the CoinJoin succeeds successfully. And also that the resulting transaction structure on the Bitcoin blockchain has certain privacy benefits and obfuscation mechanisms. However, it can also, of course, curate which inputs shall be allowed into the next CoinJoin round. Right. So, for example, inputs that have failed to sign a previous CoinJoin transaction might be excluded from participating in the next one, just so that other users can continue successfully. However, this can also be the exclusion of publicly convicted and known violent criminals, and with whom neither the coordinator nor many of its users actually want to be associated and help and support. So this was then basically a decision by the specific coordinating operating entity to have this configuration and to exclude certain known violent criminals from participating in the round. And well, one of the hopes is that this will help to reduce the censorship of general Bitcoin CoinJoin outputs, which previously, for example, users have been harassed by exchanges and banking service providers because they have used CoinJoin in the past, even though they were honest users and law-abiding citizens.
It's interesting you mention violent criminals, because the timing of it is interesting, because it's during a time when there are sanctions against Russia called on by the United States and various countries in the West. Did that have any impact in this decision by the folks behind Wasabi Wallet?
I would not say so necessarily. Just because we don't really plan to censor civilians and peaceful entrepreneurs from access to our service. That would in fact be quite difficult to actually pursue. However, this is really about known high-profile criminals, where it's just publicly acknowledged that, hey, these guys have stolen money. And we as a company don't need to provide them the service. And I think that's ultimately, the choice of the entrepreneur with whom you want to do business with. But I absolutely get your point that it can be very harsh blacklisting and censorship conditions, including entire, peaceful civilians, which of course should be avoided. We will see how it evolves in the future. I think there is a flourishing market of different coordinators where we can experiment with what users actually want.
So this has been controversial on crypto Twitter, because a lot of folks feel that Bitcoin should be censorship resistant, that this is a decentralized web that they want to promote. And so why would Wasabi wallet want to do this? Well,
I mean,
you gave a
Bitcoin
great
is censorship
explanation,
resistant,
but maybe you could,
right?
maybe you can address that decentralization spirit.
Well, Bitcoin is decentralized and therefore it is censorship resistant. It just happens that Wasabi's CoinJoin protocol is a centralized communication protocol. There is a central party called the coordinator to whom hundreds of clients can connect to collaboratively build these Bitcoin transactions. But it is a centralized protocol. Right. And so anyone operating the service now has the choice of which coins to allow and which coins to not allow, right? And under which conditions. So this is why CoinJoin coordination is different to Bitcoin. And thankfully, CoinJoin coordination can build on top of such a strong decentralized layer, such as the Bitcoin ecosystem. Right. So even though the CoinJoin coordinator might not allow a certain coin to be registered in its round, it cannot prevent you to sign transactions with the private key of the coin, right? So any single user transaction you can send completely without permission and without anyone stopping you. And likewise, you can team up with other people not related to this coordinator to build your CoinJoin transaction, right? All of these things are possible. This is not a financial censorship. This is a selective curation of whom to allow into your business, basically. It's kind of like a dress code in a restaurant to some certain extent.
It's interesting you put it that way. And key note is that there are other alternatives out there. It's not that CoinJoin is broken. You could still use other coordinators. I am curious, though, and I could be totally wrong here, but if you are a violent criminal who's on your blacklist, are you blacklisting their wallet addresses because they could theoretically just open up different wallets, many of them, and start trying to send transactions through those? How do you pinpoint and target specific individuals?
Yeah, that is the crux of the issue and the real difficulty of blockchain analysis. And this is something that uses a lot of heuristics and probabilities. So to get a real certain picture of anyone whom you try to follow is extremely difficult. And I would say that the difficulty of this enterprise will increase in the future, especially with things like Lightning Network and coin swaps, and of course CoinJoins further proliferating. So the success of surveillance and targeted attribution of identities to coins on the Bitcoin blockchain will continue to get more and more difficult. I guess that's a problem for the service provider that zk-SNACKs will use to perform the surveillance, right? zk-SNACKs as the coordinating entity will not spin up an entire surveillance apparatus to build this themselves, right? Of course, they will outsource it. Those are many of the known concerns with this entire approach. I think there are serious concerns with the entire strategy of KYC and AML, especially with blockchain surveillance. This is at best a good guess that often can be made. But in some other cases, it is pretty clear cut. And in these cases, if you're quite certain that this is in fact a known criminal, I guess the censorship does come reasonable.
All right. Max, thank you so much. Yeah, so many questions. I mean, you'd also have to know their addresses, and so many of these wallet addresses are anonymous. So it seems that there is a limited, reach that this action could take. But I understand the sentiment behind it. Max, thank you so much for joining us and explaining a bit about what led you to this decision. Appreciate your insights.
Well, thank you, Christy, for having me.
All right, that was Max Hillebrand, a Wasabi wallet contributor, Bitcoin maximalist, and crypto nomad. All right, that's it for All About Bitcoin. I'm your host, Christine Lee, and we'll do it all over again tomorrow at 3 o'clock in New York. Also, join us tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for First Mover. You're watching CoinDesk TV.